Well, very good. Welcome, everyone. Uh, this is JLN. Uh, this is JLN Critical Conversations, right? So what's happened in the last 2 months, thanks to Jamie, is we've gone from a monthly program where we just serve um, our local folks to actually a podcast. And I'm gonna ask Jamie to talk about that later because I don't understand any of it other than I talk and somehow I can go on the phone and hear my voice if I need to. It's pretty cool stuff. Um, we are very fortunate and very excited tonight. As part of the leadership series that we're doing, we have Eriks Gabliks from the National Fire Academy, the superintendent, the boss, the Ted Cheese, here to talk a little bit about some of the struggles that the last year has brought on. They did some really cool stuff. I gotta give them credit. They really had to think about how to make things work and get it past the Department of Homeland Security, who happens to be really close friends with the Department of Public, Health and Human Services. So it was a little bit different. I had I taught I don't know, a month or so ago, and just in the week I was there, the rules changed 4 times, to the better, to more open and availability and the ability to come down and get more students on. And I know Eric's and his team were primarily responsible for that. So I'm very, very grateful. Um, our next big challenge is, and we have several months, is the Fallen Firefighters Memorial, which normally has 4 to 5,000 people on campus. And I'm not sure the feds are ready for that. But that's not for tonight. We'll talk about that when we bring on the leadership of the memorial in October, on October 22nd, September 22nd. We have the IC, we have honor guard, escorts, and we have a survivor coming on to talk about the changes and the importance of the memorial. So, Eric, thank you so much for coming on. So let's talk about the COVID thing. I mean, you went from literally like everybody else, full bore, and then all of a sudden, boom, the doors are locked. So what were the biggest challenges with that?
So the issue that we ran into, and just for a little bit of background, I joined the National Fire Academy in November, moving across country from Oregon, where I ran the Public Safety Academy there in the state. So, what I found when I arrived was a lot of work underway, but also a lot of caution being taken. And by that, I mean, in March of last year, FEMA made a decision to, if you will, close down the schoolhouses. So that includes the National Fire Academy, the Emergency Management Institute, and also the Center for Domestic Preparedness, or CDP, in Anniston, Alabama. So we suspended in-person training at those 3 campuses. The same is true with our Homeland Security partners at the Federal Law Enforcement Training Center in Glencoe, Georgia, as well as the Secret Service Academy. And the reason we did that was, I think, pretty apparent to most people, right? We knew that the audience that we train, our first responders from across the country, were very busy with things locally in their communities. They were figuring out how to respond to calls for service, whether it was fire, EMS, et cetera, in their local communities, updating PPE guidelines, updating protocols on a daily basis, working with their local health providers and with the CDC. So we knew for the National Fire Academy, we weren't going to see students coming last March, April, May, right? What we also knew is that people really weren't interested in traveling, right? We knew that there were restrictions in place. We knew that, for example, a number of states had guidelines that if you do leave your state, you're going to have to quarantine for up to 2 weeks. So we knew that the time wasn't right to deliver in-person classes on campus. However, we never closed. And what I mean by that is that we still provided classes on a state-by-state basis in partnership with our state fire training academies. So some states figured out how to offer classes in, for example, large auditoriums where, we would normally do a class for 20, 25 fire officers, let's say tactics and strategy, community risk reduction, leadership, and we'd be in a classroom that you'd think about normally in an academy. But the state academy said, look, we've got an auditorium. We could do social distancing. Everybody is separate. We'll wear face coverings. And we did that across the country. So we continued to have an off-campus presence on a state-by-state basis. Some states very honestly said, look, our guidelines won't allow us to provide training. So what we did is we, in essence, put those classes back into our bucket. And what I directed our staff to do is let's get those classes out the door to other states that can host training, because what we know from the American Fire Service is that there's an ongoing need for training, right? We have succession planning in place. We have new people getting promoted, new people getting hired. So we have to keep those wheels turning to keep training provided across the country. The other thing that we did is our staff identified 10 classes that were able to be delivered via Zoom. Now, Zoom is not the end all be all. It's a very basic delivery platform. And I think a lot of your viewers and listeners are probably zoomed out, but Zoom gave us a platform to deliver training across the country. And some of those classes are in high demand. So incident safety officer, health and safety coordinator, classes that really are very important to the culture of the American Fire Service, right? How do we keep our firefighters safe and healthy? Were in high demand on Zoom, and that was a great audience for us. So we offered dozens of Zoom classes, and what that did is it allowed us to deliver training. But the other important thing is it allowed us to deliver training that people have never been to a National Fire Academy class. So we think about, for example, with your listening audience, the Northeast, where you can go from one state to another in 2 or 3 hours. But when you go to the Western states, and I'll use Oregon where I came, it would take you 10 hours to go from east to west. It would take you 7 hours to go north to south. So we know if we offer a National Fire Academy class somewhere in Oregon, it's far away from at least 70% of the other people. So what the Zoom classes allowed us to do was to not only deliver training, but also to hit audiences, both career and volunteer, that have never been to a National Fire Academy class. And the idea there was not only let's get them training, but let's let them know that the National Fire Academy exists and that we're free of charge. So we don't charge for anything that we offer. And that's one of the best kept secrets, if you will, in the federal government. We still know that there are career and volunteer fire and EMS providers that don't know that there is a National Fire Academy. Yeah. Right. So that was kind of when I arrived in November. So we continued to Zoom, but behind the scenes, our health and safety folks, our medical advisors, we were working on protocols with our FEMA DHS partners to reopen the campus. But what we had to find was the right time to do that. So the right time for us at the National Fire Academy was about 14 weeks ago. So we reopened the doors. Okay. We were excited to have students come back. But what we also know is that those students and those departments that they represent made the decision that they wanted to come back. So we can't force anyone to come to the National Fire Academy. So in some cases, we had people say, look, I'm not comfortable traveling right now. Their departments had regulations in place that wouldn't let them travel out of state. And we totally respect that. But we also had a lot of students that wanted to come back to in-person training. So the first few weeks, the regulations were pretty extensive, but not in a bad way, but really to manage that health and safety bubble, right? And I know we use the term bubble a lot, right? And you could look at what the NBA did. You could look at what colleges, universities did, what other organizations did, but we wanted to manage that campus environment from a health and safety standpoint, because we wanted to make sure that the people coming on campus, the staff, the instructors, the students weren't wondering about the safety and health protocols. We wanted those to be front and center. So the minute you arrived on campus, there was signage. If you got off the bus, there was signage. And then we transformed one of our buildings into a testing center. So for the first many weeks, everybody on campus got tested every 72 hours, regardless. Okay. As things got better, now we had the ability to no longer test people that could show that they were vaccinated. So we're only testing people that aren't vaccinated. Originally, that was every 72 hours. Now we're at once a week. Originally, when we were opened, everybody had to wear a face covering, right? Now we're at a place where if you've been vaccinated, you don't have to wear a face covering. So all those things kind of created this bubble that allowed us to provide training in a safe manner. So people weren't worrying about, what about this and what about that? You knew everybody in that class next to you went through a test, right? You knew everybody in the class was following the same guidelines. And of course, just like our fire and EMS organizations across the country, the number one factor that made us successful was the self-awareness of health and safety, right? If you don't feel good, don't come to class. If you don't feel good, don't come to the National Fire Academy, right? We'll make it up to you somewhere else. We'd love to have you back, but we don't want you coming if you meet these symptoms, right? So our system has worked really well. Each week, as you mentioned, things got better. So we were able to open up the fitness center. We're able to open up the swimming pool. We were able to open up more venues on campus. So each week things have gotten better. And what we've done as a result is that we have increased the class offerings in August and September because we right now are running at about 1/3 capacity on campus. So even if the class could take 25 or 30 students, we're going to have about 20 or 15, depending on the number, because we want to have that social distance in the classroom. But we're adding more classes to fill in some of the empty classrooms because we're in a better place now. Last week, I'm really proud to share with you that on campus overall, more than 85% of the people on campus were vaccinated. Right. So that makes our discussions with health and safety a lot better. Our health and safety staff have been truly engaged. Our organization has been engaged. For the first time ever, we have a nurse on campus. So during the pandemic, one of the things that we wanted to add was a nurse, and that's come in handy because our colleagues from Hawaii that come in, they're required to be tested within 72 hours of flying back to Hawaii. So our nurse is able to give them the test, give them a certificate that they've been tested, that they're good to go. And those folks from Hawaii don't have to look around on where do I go get a test in Emmitsburg, Gettysburg. So they're good to go. And that's part of that service that we provide. So we're excited to be back, but there were really 3 elements that we wanted to make sure were non-negotiable. One is that the health and safety protocols applied to everybody on campus. Right? We couldn't pick and choose. It didn't matter what state you were. It didn't matter what rank you were, right? Instructors, staff, students, the same protocols apply. The second thing is that we wanted people to know that the guidelines may change plus or minus based on what was going on campus and what was going on around us. So we are in Emmitsburg, just south of Gettysburg, Pennsylvania. So we're right on that Maryland-Pennsylvania border. So we have to make sure we're following the guidelines in both states. So we let our student, staff, instructors know these are the guidelines, but be flexible in case something changes. And that's worked out well. And the third and probably most important was we wanted to make sure that the student experience wasn't impacted. So we wanted to make sure men and women coming from across the country to classes at the National Fire Academy were getting the same quality training that we were providing before the pandemic. And that was the case, and we've done that ever since. So we're pretty excited about it. So that's kind of where we're at, Nick. And it's a great question to kind of start off today.
Well, so from personal experience, I arrived on 2 weeks after you opened, I think it was, because I'm pretty sure that was like the first, because the guys I was teaching with had only been there for 2 weeks. So, so the day started out with a temperature check every day. I was fully vaccinated. So for me, I had that advantage, but I carried the card and a mask with me every day, just in case things changed. So every morning, we get your temperature checked. If you didn't, as he said, you ended up in the pub. Actually, it was a combination of the rec and the pub was the testing area. And so there was a constant stream of folks that had not been tested yet, or that had to be tested. In the beginning, all we had to do was show our vaccination one time, and they put a band on. Midweek that changed, and we had to do, we could forego the temperature, but we had to show the vaccination. And then again, by the end of the week, again, things were starting to loosen up, and I think the pool and I think the phys ed center opened up the next week. A couple of changes, though. Again, you got to protect the herd, right? So you're eating by yourself, essentially. You're sitting in the middle of a 6-foot plexiglass box, and And if you violated that, as he said, things changed dramatically, and you didn't want to do that anymore. So again, the kids and our kids, the students had to get used to the idea that there's rules and regulations, and yes, they're really going to make you do them, but it's for your own good. And again, again, food service was different. All these little things, but as we continue to go on, they're getting better and better and more back to normal.
Mhm.
Uh, yeah. So you know what I did forget to mention is you did come from Oregon. Actually, you started in New Jersey, but I'd like you to talk about, because we talked about extensively before. Talk about what you did in Oregon before you came here, because I think that leads to how you got where you are now.
Sure. And Nick, let me kind of finish up a comment on your last response. But, you know, one of the things why we were sticklers with the protocol was obviously safety and health is non-negotiable, right? We know that from
Right.
the fire service. It's about culture. It's about keeping people safe. But we also knew that everybody was watching what we're doing at the National Fire Academy, because we are
Exactly.
the National Fire Academy, right?
Yep.
So if you have guidelines in place, you have to follow them. And really what we didn't want to do is become that next event where there's a super spreader, right? So,
Yeah.
so how embarrassing would it be if we had a media truck outside the gate saying, can you tell us how come 25 students here on campus have COVID, right? So we said, we want to make sure that the protocols allow us to deliver our training to meet our mission, but also ensure the health and safety of the folks on campus. So, you know, we've kind of worked really hard on that. Through our testing, we did identify 2 students that did have COVID symptoms. So none of them showed any symptoms, but the test came up positive midweek. So one of those folks had been tested when they arrived, no issues. By midweek, they had tested positive. The follow-up test was positive, and they left campus once to go pick up allergy meds at the local drugstore because of the tree pollen that was affecting them in Emmitsburg. So that person was able to drive home. They were local, and that worked out well. They went to the doctor, still showing those symptoms, but tested positive. And then we did have a person test positive when they got off the bus. And then we did the follow-up test. We put them in quarantine, and they made a decision to drive back home, again, showing no symptoms. But what we did from a health and safety standpoint, we tested everybody in that cohort to make sure that we didn't have any other issues. And again, out of an abundance of caution, and I know that that term has been so overused in the last year, but abundance of caution is what we did, so that, again, the students in the class, the instructors, the staff aren't worried about, we heard somebody had positive symptoms to COVID. We could say, yes, they had a positive test, and this is what we did to ensure the safety and health of everybody else. So it's worked out pretty good. You know, some bumps and bruises along the way, but I think that's not unique. I think everybody's had that, but we did it.
I think and the comfort level was actually there. I mean, that's and when I told people I was going down the academy, they started getting all squiggly. I said, "Listen, I'm telling you, they've 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 done a heck of a job down there, and I'm very comfortable that that'll take place." And it was very comfortable. Everybody, they knew the deal. They knew what they needed to do. And again, we had a much smaller class than normal.
Right.
But again, that's part of that. Instead of having 6 people at a table, we have 4 people at a table, and maybe
Yeah.
we don't have as many tables, right? Because you
Right.
need that distance. And it actually worked out well, because the reduction in students gave us an increase in contact time, you
Yep.
know, to work on projects and stuff like that. I'm not suggesting we lower the student numbers, but it worked out that way
Right.
that
Right.
particular time.
Yeah. Yep. So back to your other question. So sorry about that little detour.
No, that's all right.
But you know, I started in 1980 as a volunteer firefighter in New Jersey, a lot like your listeners, right? Growing up in New Jersey, 80% of the fire service in New Jersey is volunteer. That's not unique, right? Connecticut, Maryland, New Jersey, Delaware, Maine, Massachusetts. Massachusetts, I know, has a lot of call men, right? Paid on call firefighters, but that's how I cut my teeth, if you will, in the fire service. And then served with the Adelphia Fire Company in Howell Township for about 10 years. So that's in Monmouth County near the Jersey Shore. And then moved west when I found my dream girl, if you will. So I met my wife when she was going to Rutgers. I ended up moving west. It was either I move or she moves. I headed west. It was a great opportunity. Got employed with the state of Oregon originally to set up the 911 training program for our dispatchers. And then that led to working at the Public Safety Academy. And I did that for 30 years, believe it or not. The last 10 as the director of the Department of Public Safety Standards and Training. So it's a unique organization in the country because in Oregon, all of the public safety training and regulatory functions are under one agency. So I'm very honored to be the first employee internally to become promoted to the director. I did that for 10 years. I served under 3 different governors. So I was appointed by the governor, and also I reported to a 23-member board on public safety standards and training, which I lovingly called the United Nations of Public Safety, because my board was made up of police, fire, corrections, 911, citizen members, a district attorney, the state fire marshal, superintendent, state police. But the beauty of the system is that we were engaged in training and regulating, and through certification, 41,000 public safety providers. So 13,000 of those roughly were volunteer, of which 80%, I'm sorry, were firefighters, of which 80% were volunteer. All of our law enforcement officers, corrections officers, 911 operators, private security providers. So we had a really amazing system, but it worked for Oregon. It may not work in every state, but it worked for us. The benefit for us is that we had a centralized academy. So we were the only academy in the state. Our academy was 235 acres, more than a dozen buildings with 300,000 square feet under roof. So a dozen classrooms, 350 dormitory rooms, a dining hall, a large scenario village in the back. So driving course, city streets, buildings that were props. So we had our own little town in the village. And the benefit for us from a public safety mindset, it wasn't just for police, it was for all, right? So it was police, fire, corrections, all having the ability to be trained not only in the classrooms, but also in a scenario village. So if you think about how often police, fire, EMS work side by side, including our 911 partners, think of an active shooter situation, right? We had right a very basic prop, but we brought in 20 containers that came out of the port of Portland, and we put them together through our facilities folks and made a schoolhouse out of it. So we made them into classrooms and hallways, and that allowed all those agencies to come for in-service and advanced classes. And we can talk about it in the morning and then go out and actually do it in the afternoon. So it just gave us an amazing footprint, if you will, to provide training. And we're very blessed, and it was an honor to serve there for a number of years. So it's pretty neat to come from a system like that.
We were talking before the show, so I got sent by the academy down to Georgia, and it was very, very similar. It was kind of mind-numbing when I first got there because, again, everything that's public safety, the youth parole, all the different guards and the different levels, the difference between the high security guards and the regular guards, all the firefighters. So all the certification classes, all the recruit classes. When I was there were 4 recruit classes just in the fire department alone. There was 3 or 4 law enforcement recruit classes. And then we had the forest rangers and wildlife and all these other folks, all again on this and the similar with prisons on the outside of it, because it was all state public land.
Right.
They had the traffic, slide pans. They had just about everything you can imagine, all on this massive campus. And it was cool. It was for us, we're lucky if we put 1 or 2 classes through something. And of course, our police in one place and a fire in another.
Right.
But up there, lunchtime was crazy. They come marching in, and you just get out of their way, and it never stopped. I mean, the lunch period was like huge as they try to get all these people through.
Yeah, and Nick, it's a good question and a good point, because one of the things, and we talked about this before the webinar started, right? But one of my guidelines to staff is I want the building to be full, right? So if we had empty classrooms, let's get students in those classrooms. So we had a core mission that was established by the state for basic training, right? For advanced training. but there's also what I call that specialized training. So some of that was unique. So we would bring in, for example, the state fire marshal's office would offer classes for inspectors. We would host the National Fallen Firefighters Foundation, right? So we would bring in instructors do Courage to be Safe.
Yep.
We would host International Fire Service instructors to do live fire training. So the direction to the respective programs, and that's a key, right? We have to respect, like, and this is the United Nations model, right? United Nations, but we have to respect that fire is different than police, which is different than 911, that is different corrections. And all of those respective groups have training needs, right? Basic, ongoing, advanced, perishable skills, you name it. But the one benefit that we had was where we come together. So I mentioned active shooter, but some of the others that we were really successful on, for example, peer support. We were able to bring in peer support classes. So a peer support team train the trainer class that was for public safety. We had police, fire, corrections, 911 in that class. And those are men and women that were going to be involved in peer support teams in their organizations that were trying to figure out how to do it. So if you think about a fire department coming into the same class with their police department, they work in that same jurisdiction. They respect that each of them have a different role and wear a different uniform, but there may be times that those peer support team members will be working together, right? Especially on a critical incident. We did the same thing with chaplain training. We were fortunate to host a public safety chaplain program for 2 weeks. So we brought in chaplains from police and fire, corrections, 911, and they came in to learn how to be a public safety chaplain. And this is just my years of experience. And I think you and a lot of folks on this call know that it's not as simple as just going down to your local church saying, would you like to be a fire department or police department chaplain, right? It's what are you going to do? How are you going to provide peer support? How are you going to provide grief counseling at the scene of a tragic motor vehicle accident? Or how do you provide support when somebody's house is burned? So we were fortunate to bring that type of training into the academy. Of course, the ICS, that makes sense, right? We do all that work together, but then also some leadership topics. So one that I'll think about, and this isn't a plug for the individual, but just an example, but Gordon Graham, right? We had a large auditorium. We could bring in Gordon Graham to talk about risk management, and he could talk to police, fire, EMS, 911 in that same group. And we were able to bring in 400 people into our auditorium and provide that class. And everybody left with nuggets to take home and look at their policies and procedures. And it didn't matter what discipline you were from.
You know what? I wish I don't have my train whistle with me. Maybe see him in a couple weeks.
And that's just one example, right? But there are so many things that if we take away the badges and the patches, right? It's public safety, it's leadership, right? If we brought in, for example, Disney to talk about customer service, that can apply to anybody in public safety, anybody in government for that matter. So what we really looked at is how do we provide a place for people to come and provide training?
I think if you look at COVID, there's a great example of how, we're all going to the same buildings. We're all going to take care of the same people, right? One of our directors of training has sent me a message asking you, how is that funded? How is Oregon funded?
So this is kind of the secret sauce, okay? So our 911 training program was funded out of the 911 telephone tax. So the state collected on each phone, wireless or hardwire, right? And I'm dating myself because I don't know if anybody has a hardwire phone anymore, but they received a tax on each phone that could access 911. So our training program was funded by that. Our fire training and certification programs, we didn't charge for training, we didn't charge for certification, was funded through the fire insurance premium tax. So in Oregon, the state levied a 1% tax on any fire insurance policy written. So that included your car, your boat, your plane, whatever. But if you had fire insurance, the state levied a 1% tax on that. What that tax paid for was our Office of State Fire Marshal, our state police arson unit, and also the DPSST fire training and certification unit. And then our criminal justice training, which was the biggest part of our budget, that was funded by criminal fines and assessment. So if you ever got in a traffic ticket in Oregon, you would help pay for public safety training. So that's where we were fortunate that we didn't charge for anything that we provided. We reached about 25 thousand students a year. But really the state saw that the training of public safety providers was a benefit to the state, and we shouldn't be charging locals for that. Now, granted, some of those specialized classes I mentioned may have had a fee if it was to bring an instructor, and that was
Right,
done through the
right.
associations, but the day-to-day basic training we didn't charge for, so we were pretty lucky about that.
So the director of training, when you said what you said about the fire tax or the insurance, I thought he was Italian for a minute because his hands started flailing all over the place. We just lost a battle, and we're not done yet. We're not done yet, but we we've struggled very hard to get that. We have some folks that believe that if the money gets in, it'll be stolen by the other party to be spent on something else and some other goofy ideas. So we're trying that. We're trying very, very hard. Matter of fact, one of the leaders, Chief Iverson from um, um, Yannick, sorry, was walking around giving everybody and their brother, the petitions to get into the state, and we just at least it got brought up in committee, but it didn't go anywhere.
Yeah,
Someday,
and the key for us, so both Nick and Chief is, the legislative language was very clear and very prescriptive, right? So it wasn't a catch-all budget. It specifically was earmarked in the legislation. It can only pay for these programs, right? So it didn't become, and we ran into this, right? Because we had some financial downturns while I was in Oregon, and legislators see buckets of money and they want to access those. And what they said is that we're going to take money out of these accounts and do a sweep. Because of the statute protecting that money, they weren't able to sweep, for example, the fire insurance premium tax. They had to leave that alone because it wasn't general fund money. But it didn't mean people didn't say, well, we wrote the law, we could change the law, right? We always ran into that. But what really helped us in Oregon is that we had very active leadership from the fire service. So, when it comes to training, career volunteer chiefs, district directors, instructors all agree training is important. We had obviously some legislators that understood that and even served in volunteer fire departments or career fire departments. And the benefit of being part of the Department of Public Safety Standards and Training, we also had police and 911 supporting fire training, and fire chiefs would support law enforcement training, right? So you have a stronger ally. And then behind the scenes, we had two other allies that most often don't get thought about when we discuss this, but we had the League of Oregon Cities and the Special Districts Associations, which in essence support the infrastructure for communities. And then we also had the insurance industry supporting what we do. Because what the insurance industry said, and I'll use fire for this discussion, what the insurance industry said is, look, we have supported the fire insurance premium tax because we want firefighters, whether they're career or volunteer, to be trained to safely and effectively respond to calls involving people that we insure and properties that we insure. If we do have fires in those locations, we want to make sure that there are men and women trained that can come and investigate that fire and tell us what happened.
absolutely, and that this is the frustration that we see now. I thought in our state, I can't remember. Maybe Billy chime in if you want. We have two two organizations that primarily support the municipals, and I would have figured, since this is money that they're not going to have, that the locals would not have to raise to send their folks to school, that would be a home run. Billy, did they support that? Did the CCM?
The Connecticut Conference of Municipalities did support it, and the big agency, or the biggest group that was against it, believe it or not, was the insurance industry. They did not want to be, and I'll use the word taxed, but they did not want to be taxed with the job of collecting X amount of dollars per policy and then forwarding it to the state. So the legislation was reasonably specific. It was going to pay for entry level training, officer level training, incident command training. But the problem was, welcome to Connecticut, the insurance capital of the world. They've got a much bigger lobby than the fire service. And there's 11 different fire service organizations in the state. They all met before the legislative session, and they all said firefighter training, getting this bill through, is the number one priority for all of them. So there was a united front within the fire service. But again, being in New England, you got your block of fire service, you got your cops looking for money, you got your EMS folks looking for money, you got the DOT looking for money. It's yeah, as Nick said, extremely frustrating. And this is the third or fourth year in a row. So that we've gone through this process.
Well, hopefully we'll keep swinging the bat, bro, and we'll figure it out sooner or later. You know what I mean? We don't want, we always say that a lot of stuff is born from blood and from things that have gone bad, and obviously we don't want that to happen to push something over the top. But it is exceedingly frustrating. So what's next for so can you give us an idea? Let's finish up the COVID and the
Yeah.
restrictions. So where do you think we're going with that as far as opening up more? You said you want to get up to, like, would you say 70%? You had
Yeah,
30 now.
our plan is we're going to add more classes and students in August and September. Our goal is to be back up to 100% by October. Now, of course, that is our plan, right? We have to make sure health and safety guidelines allow us to do that.
Yeah.
I'm excited to tell you that we started state weekends last weekend. So we had
Right.
Rhode Island and South Carolina on campus. So they had a great weekend. We have Pennsylvania coming up later on this month. We're going to be hosting Connecticut on the weekend of September 11th. So one of the things that we're doing with our staff, working with National Fallen Firefighters Foundation, is working with the Connecticut State Fire Training Director and their weekend, if you will, to see if they want to have a ceremony on campus on 9/11 to honor our fallen. Obviously, growing up in New Jersey and then knowing, Connecticut's impact on 9/11, a lot of people from Connecticut died in the World Trade Center. A lot of those first responders live and worked in Connecticut. So we wanted to offer to Connecticut to see if we do a wreath laying ceremony or something on 9/11 to honor that incident, especially as we celebrate the 20th anniversary,
Right.
believe it or not, this year, right? While those students are on campus. So we've made that offer there, and we're having those discussions. But then, we're having other programs come up. So, that's kind of between now and October. In the long term, we're in the process of adding classes, updating class. So we want to make sure that what we do stays fresh and current. The other thing we're excited about is we're going to be moving away from Zoom, and that's not a knock on Zoom, but we're going to be moving to a learning management system, so an LMS system. So much like a college, university, or even industry, you can log in for classes certain times of the week. So we see that really as a force multiplier for the National Fire Academy. So we want to make sure that we're offering classes online and virtually for people that don't have the ability to come down, right? So can we offer a class, 4 hours a week over 10 weeks, right? And that's a long commitment, but it's really no different if you go to community college. So are there ways that we can maximize what we do by using an LMS system and bringing in firefighters virtually from across the country to take classes? So those are kind of some of the academic parts. The other thing that we're doing, so I'll share with you what we're doing, and I'll share with you what we've done. So what we've done while we haven't had students on campus, our facilities folks have knocked it out of the park. So we have new carpeting, we have fresh paint across the campus. We replaced 7 slate roofs. So if you've never been to the National Fire Academy, we are under historic preservation. So we have to keep buildings intact to a certain standard. So that has included slate roofs. So we've replaced those. We've paved some parking lots that used to be gravel. All the dorm rooms have been refurbished. We've replaced the fire and life safety systems on campus. We're also upgrading heating and air conditioning on campus. So a number of people on this call have been into the chapel on campus. It's over 200 years old. This week, we're in the process of replacing the air conditioning and heating in that building so that it's up to current standards. And then as we move to be more self-sufficient from an energy standpoint, we're adding solar panels to the J building, for example, where most of the classrooms are for NFA. We're adding solar panels to that so that we can kind of recoup that energy and not have to buy it from the meter. So that's what's happened. The biggest change that you probably noticed, Nick, when you came on campus was the front gate.
Yes,
So the
I
front
was gonna
gate
ask you
is
about
now
that.
more professional. The security trailer that was temporary, and a lot of you have been on campus,
30
it was
years.
temporary for 20 years. So it's gone. Okay, if you want it, give me your address. We'll try to deliver it to you. But the security gate is now more professional. We have a security welcome center that is also more professional. So it really gives us that appearance of a National Fire Academy, right? So that's kind of one of the big changes when you roll into campus. And then, what we're also doing is we're upgrading the simulation lab where we do our command and control classes. So we're replacing the software in there and the monitors to make that more modern. And then we're also doing a significant investment in our burn buildings on campus where we train our fire and arson investigators. So we have an amazing partnership with the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosive with ATF. So they're partners. We have 3 agents assigned to us on campus as instructors. That course is one of the premier programs in the country. So we've upgraded the curriculum, but now we need to upgrade that infrastructure to make sure that we're having that same experience hands-on. And while the burn labs won't be changing, we've just upgraded those. We are adding some health and safety features down there. For example, the locker room where people could shower after they do fire investigations, because decon for a fire investigator is no different than for a structural firefighter, right? We don't want to be taking that stuff to our car and to our house and into our garages. So we want to make sure that we're having those health and safety features in the investigation area, just like we do on structural firefighting that you do locally. So those are kind of some of the long-term, short-term goals that we have.
For some of the folks may not know, because I did not realize this, I'm embarrassed to say, I've been going to the academy since 1980. And for the first time, a few weeks ago, I looked out the window and I saw the burn buildings. And I said to my co-instructor, I said, "What are those?" He goes, "That's where we do the arson class. That's the burn building." And I didn't know that. I did not know that was there at all, because I hadn't gone down that way, in a long time. Yeah, there was trades everywhere. There were people fixing, plumbing, banging, cutting, just tuning the whole place up. We should talk a little bit about that. So getting into the academy, it's not the same simple evolution anymore.
It's simpler, Nick. It's simpler than ever.
It is simpler.
Right.
Sit, move.
We have computers now, so we don't require that you fill out a form anymore, right? So if you're interested in coming to the National Fire Academy, go on to our admissions window. So all you have to do for your listeners is Google National Fire Academy NFA admissions. That'll drop you into the catalog. You can look at what classes we offer, and there's hundreds of them in 7 different areas, right? So that includes EMS leadership, hazmat, leadership classes, tactics and strategy, leadership supervision, managing officer, executive fire officer, prevention, investigations, community risk reduction, fire investigation, right? Wildland urban interface. So all of those are drop downs. And then when you see the class you want, you pick the dates you want, you fill out the application, you include the person in your department that's going to approve your application and put their email in there. When you're done, you hit go. That sends the application admissions. Our admission system then kicks back an email to the person that you said is your supervisor, your chief. They have to click that you approve them being enrolled in the class. And there are admissions people try to get you into the class that you ask for. So not everybody gets the class that they want, because some classes have more demand than others. But the other thing that I'll share with your listeners is a secret that a lot of people know, but most don't. And that is that, unfortunately, we do have vacancies in classes from time to time. And if you Google NFA vacancies, that'll bring up our list of vacancies, and it'll show that those classes have empty seats in it. So if you apply for one of those classes and you miss the admissions window, that means that we're trying to fill that. So I look at it as an airline, right? If I'm sending flights, which are classes out, and I've got room for 30, I want 30 students in that class that want that training. So that vacancies list allows us to do that. The nice thing is you'll find out within a matter of days if you've been accepted, and then we'll make plans to bring you to the academy. The other thing, and I mentioned this when we started, is that we're free. So we do not charge for any of the classes. We also provide you with lodging. We provide you with world-class training from some amazing instructors that have been there and done that. And they're, in essence, giving back by sharing their knowledge, skills, and abilities with others. But if you're accepted, we also reimburse you for your travel. So if you're driving down or if you're flying down, we will reimburse you for that from the federal government. Your expense is this: your time to take the class and the cost of your meals while you're on campus. Other than that, everything is covered. We'll even give you paper and pencil.
And highlighters.
And highlighters, yes.
No, and it really is that simple. So, Eriks, I'm coming down at the end of August for the new leadership
Mhm.
class for David. So I had to do that. I had to, and I was filling out the paperwork, and I called admissions. I go, "What are you doing?" "But no, we don't want that. We don't want it. Don't send it. This is where you go." And literally in 10 minutes, I was done.
Yes.
Just boom, 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 boom. And I got in, obviously. And then again, the only thing is, as he mentioned, is there is a cost for food. That's not a new thing. That's always been there. And 3 squares, you can't argue with that.
Yeah. Now, one of the things we run into, Nick, is sometimes chiefs and chief officers are surprised that they get an email from our admissions saying, "Hey, what is
Oh,
this?"
come
Right?
on.
If that chief or that training officer, that battalion chief, that captain doesn't know that, that might create an issue, right? So unless we get that okay, because you're representing your organization, whether you're crew or volunteer, it doesn't matter. We want that person to say, "Yes, I want this student in the class. I support that application." The other reason we moved away from paper is not only is this more efficient, but remember the federal government as a public record, we have to maintain that paper for a number of years. So
Right.
that includes putting it in a box, heating it, cooling it, moving it, keeping track of it, and
Keeping
then one
it
day
dry,
getting rid of
keeping
it.
it dry.
Right. Yeah. So now with the electronic system, not only is it more agile, but it also allows us to do a lot of intellectual properties issues that we don't have with paper.
I'll tell you the other home run, and I've done this several times actually, and is when you see an ad for a pilot. I love pilots for a couple of reasons. One of the things I bring to the pilot is I'm that nerd that sits with the workbook, and if there's something screwy with the workbook, they actually give me an extra workbook and I circle it, and so that the contractor can figure that out and get those things fixed. But pilots are great because the reason it's a pilot is right, it's brand new. So when they're taking a paradigm shift or a tack to go one way or the other, or something needs to be updated, uh, it's perfect. You're going to be there at the cutting edge of the program. And if you're, I don't want to say subject matter expert, but if you've been around a little while and you've done whatever that is, that's even better because it's more broth for the soup, right? It's just more stuff that the rest of that group is going to share with you, and then you share with them. And then the other thing I noticed is while most classes at the National Fire Academy will stay very close together, I have managing officer students that I still communicate with on a regular basis. But those pilots, because you are really digging in and you're really creating something new, right? They're just closer. They work closer. I don't mean as an insult to any other program, but the pilots are very cool. And if you
Right.
get an opportunity to do that, jump.
Yeah,
Because
and the pilots really, if you think about it, you're putting your fingerprint on a national program, right? So I'll give you an example. Yesterday I sat in for 2 hours. We're doing a pilot for a new youth fire service leadership program, right? People that do youth fire center intervention, but put the programs together. So the afternoon session was doing interviews with the youth fire center, like in a fire station, in a building, at their home, etc., and the pros and cons. So we went through this. But after the discussion on the pilot, right, the evaluators go, "Okay, what's missing from this discussion?" Well, here's what came out. As we look at justice reforms across the country, one of the things that's new that we're going to add to the course for the students is find out what your laws are in your state regarding interviewing juveniles,
Mm.
right? So in a lot of states, you can't do that anymore unless their parent is with them,
Right.
or in a school unless there's a guardian. So we want to make sure that youth fire setter intervention specialist knows that going in. So before they do their first interview, that they've looked at, okay, what's the law in my state, whether I'm from Connecticut, Delaware, Florida, Montana, right? I should know that before I do that interview, because I don't want to break the law. So that came up during a pilot, and everybody in the room said, that's not an issue in our state. But other people said it's an issue in our state. And we said, well, let's find out if it's an issue in your state. So that was like really good feedback to our staff and the curriculum design folks. And now we'll add that into that student manual and that discussion going forward.
The one of the best pilots I did was in the early days of incident management teams. They brought the Coast Guard in, the wildfire, they brought a bunch of people in, again, advertised pilot. And I grabbed another member from our team that I said, dude, we got to get in this room, because these are the people that are taking it, that's going to make this thing work and take it and do it now, and are going to do it. And that was a very rewarding.
Yes.
That was a different one though, because that was a fire administrator. So we couldn't stay on campus. We had to stay off and all that other stuff, but it was still worth the trip. So what, if you had your binoculars out, or your periscope out, or whatever, and you're looking down the road, what do you see? Let's do two things, if you don't mind. Let me ask you a question I asked Bobby Holt. What do you see as the big issues right now that the fire service, the emergency response group is trying to get their hands around and are struggling with? What do you see? Like, is it mental health? Is it whatever? Is it millennials? I don't know.
Well, I think there's four of them, right? The first one, not only mental health, but taking care of our own, right? It's the culture, cancer prevention, behavioral health, right? What a lot of us did when we were young, starting as firefighters, we wouldn't do today, right? It used to be a badge of courage to be covered in soot and to have your helmet singed, right? Your Bork eye shields would have to be replaced, right? So we can kind of relate. But today, what we're looking at is, let's do decon, right? We know a lot more now than we do back then, and I'm dating myself here, right? But 30, 40 years ago, we didn't know what we know now about cancer. No. We also know how to prevent it. We also know now, and I'll use myself as an example, coming from Oregon, where I was a deputy chief, also in a combination department. What I know now is, we covered two major highway systems that unfortunately had fatal car crashes. I know now from going to car crashes with a lot of young firefighters, they may have never seen a person that's deceased, right? In the past, we just say, look, the police have given us permission. They'd like us to remove the body. We have a chaplain there. But now what I do differently is I'll talk to everybody on the crew to say, look, here's what we're being asked to do. Does anybody have a problem with this, right? Because we have to realize that somebody who's 18, 19, 20 may have never seen a person that's deceased, right? So we need to think about that. And after that call, we need to check in on them, say, hey, are you doing okay, right? So that taking care of our own, right, from a behavioral standpoint, a physical standpoint, is one of the other elements. The other thing that I look at from the fire service, and specifically at the National Fire Academy, is looking at the diversity issue. Right? We need to have more women as instructors. We need to have more women in the classrooms. The same is true from underrepresented populations, Black, Latino firefighters, right? So we're looking at working with those organizations, have reached out to let them know that we are the National Fire Academy. We're here for every firefighter, career or volunteer across the country. We'd love for you to apply and come here. And we're making some good inroads in there. The third one is embracing technology. While classroom training is important, we also know that there's other vehicles out there, and we've brought that forward with Zoom, right? So moving into the LMS system will allow us to do all of that, and we're excited about that. And that's not unique to the National Fire Academy. I think fire departments and fire training academies across the country are looking at different ways to deliver training to different populations. The next one is building partnerships with our communities. I think if you look coming out of the COVID-19 pandemic, and even though we're not out of it yet, the fire and EMS service has shown once again the value it brings to communities across the country by not only helping in a lot of places getting shots in arms, but even things as simple as coordinating vaccination sites, right? Looking at how do we get these sites set up so they can be efficient. So fire and EMS providers came in, career and volunteered, and said, look, we manage incidents all the time. We can help you with this. So I think those community partnerships continue to be an area that we could do more work in. And then finally, and this is my role both as a previous state training director and now as the National Fire Academy superintendent, it's more than just suppression. And that's not a knock on anybody listening to this, right? We're always going to have people responding on fire apparatus to 911 calls for service and non-emergency calls for service, but we have to focus on all the other elements of the fire service. So community risk reduction, prevention, inspections, investigations, youth fire center, all those elements are just as important to support the fire department's mission in their community as the suppression folks. But most of the time we think, hey, it's on operations, all these other things we do, but it's all about operations. So what I look at is making sure all of those different program areas at the National Fire Academy are just as healthy and delivering just as many classes as those that get our frontline commanders for incident command, tactics and strategy ready, leadership ready. All those other things are just as important. So that's kind of a quick off the top of my head view.
I, as you know, I have this little affection for community risk reduction. But one of the first thing I say in every class is I've never had to activate a RIT team, fast team, rapid intervention, whatever you want, for a fire that didn't happen.
Right.
Never. I've never had to hold traction on an 82-year-old Alzheimer's patient who broke her femur and doesn't have a clue what we're doing for someone who didn't fall down.
Mm-hmm.
And emergency response is still there. Emergency response is just the last resort, right? But if the departments that are surviving and excelling are doing their risk assessment and then building the system for their risk assessment. And yeah, there is a fallback that if nothing works, if there's the inspection, the guy got away with it, there's no engineering, there's no whatever, yeah, we still have to go there. But in my last job, if you took all fire calls, not fires, all fire calls, that was 4% of our 1,200 runs. 4%. Everything else was everything that we did. And we were very lucky that we didn't have more bad calls and stuff. And I really appreciate what you're saying about, the young kids with, seeing their first fatality and being told back in the day, just suck it up. Well, that doesn't work anymore. As we look on at that. So I'm gonna put the big question out there on the spot. What's your long view? What's your long thought process? You've given us a lot already on where you think we can be in the near future. What do you see that you would need a pair of binoculars to see that down the line?
So the one thing that's pretty clear to me, and it's a good thing, but also an opportunity, and that is that we only have so many classrooms and so many beds at the National Fire Academy, right? So I would love to be at a place where I'm just turning people away every day saying, I'm sorry, you can't get in. But what that means is that those people may not reapply, right? So really what I would like to do is maximize not only our distance learning, which is a new frontier for us, but also maximize our partnerships with our state fire training academies. We currently have a great partnership with the state fire training academies. And I used to be on the receiving end of that, right? I knew I received 9 classes a year from the National Fire Academy. I got a 6-day class a year. I could offer National Fire Academy classes through instructors that I had trained to deliver those. But I want to maximize that benefit because really, whether I'm in Connecticut, Rhode Island, Massachusetts, Florida, Oklahoma, that state fire training director is in essence a de facto representative of the National Fire Academy. So I want to make sure that we're giving them additional tools in their toolboxes so they can offer even more NFA classes. And what a lot of folks on this call know, and Nick, you obviously experience this when you come on campus, but once you go through a National Fire Academy class, you're going to want to go to another one, right? So if we can get them active in state classes, then they'll come to campus eventually, and then they'll really be hooked and realize their professional development, lifelong opportunities that are available. So maximizing that partnership with our state partners, and then working really a lot more with our national partners to help get the word out And I mentioned this once or twice already, but I'll kind of emphasize it. Still today in 2021, with all of the social media vehicles that are out there and all the publications we have, there are firefighters, career and volunteer, that don't know that there's a National Fire Academy, right? That they have no idea that we have the largest library in the United States on fire and EMS and emergency management that is available free of charge, with research librarians that will be able to help you if you're working on a project. They may not realize that National Fire Programs has publications available that you could download, put your department logo on, and hand them out at a community event. And people say, oh my God, this is great. Who did this? And you go, I did. But in reality, we gave you the platform. All you had to do is finish it up and hand it out. So getting people to know what their federal taxes pay for and what resources we have to really partner with our fire service partners across the country on a state-by-state basis.
I'll tell you, we had a little debate on the NFPA standard for helmets. And as you know, that the standard says they're only good for 10 years. And so we were fiscally tight, and I'm looking at 20 helmets, and they're not $50 anymore or $100 anymore. And I'm looking at coats, and I'm looking at boots, and I'm looking at replacing motors and all these other things. So I went and I said, where am I going to go to really figure this out? Because it all started back with a research paper done by the National Fire and Insurance or something. And I found it at the resource center. I typed it up and I say, listen, this is what I'm looking for. Do you have it? And they made a copy of it. Because they're not going to let that baby out. They made a copy of it, sent it out to me. And because it literally refers back to this document that was done many years ago on how to test them and how it has to with it. And I didn't even know that, but I knew where to go.
Yeah.
I knew where to go to find that.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah, no, and you're spot on, right? But a lot of people don't know that we actually have a research library, right? So it doesn't cost you anything. And even if we have a document, so let's say that you said, man, those are 3 reports that I'd love to have. If we could release those to you and not have to scan them, we could send them to your local library through the interlibrary loan program. You pick them up at the library, drop them off, and they send them back to us. No charge to you whatsoever.
I tell you, I don't know if and maybe they probably already do. I'm embarrassed to ask this question. Have they PDF'd a lot of the research papers?
Yeah, we're moving to digital libraries because that's the future, right? It does 2 things.
Yeah.
One is it makes it more searchable for people and we could send them the electronic file. But the other one is that we have less needs for storage because we don't have to have all those bookshelves.
Because when we were looking at doing a strategic plan, the first thing I did was to go in, do the research, again, figure it out, and then, go from there.
Yeah. Yeah. And then the other thing, Nick, I'll share with you on where I look at in the future. And I bring this to the National Fire Academy as a state director and as a firefighter for many years. Really, we have to balance the cultural shift of the fire service that are chasing that next certification level, right? So people won't go to some classes if they don't get their firefighter 2 or their fire officer 3 or whatever, right? So it's great that we're seeking professional development for certification, but there are so many other classes available that are good to know. So an example, if you went to a peer support class, if you went to a, dealing with people in crisis, right? Somebody that's having an emotional crisis, you probably won't use that toward an NFPA certification. And it's not a knock on NFPA, right? They've created an amazing system for states to adopt for professionalism, but there's all these other classes that are out there that are important as well. And we see that at the National Fire Academy. I'll have people say, I don't know why I'd come to the National Fire Academy. I'm not going to get my fire officer 2 out of this. Well, what I would say is that you're going to come because you're going to get some really good knowledge. You're going to get to network with other people, and you're going to build a relationship with that class and with those instructors. And you'll take something back that you'll implement that'll make you or your organization much better.
It's funny you say that because I had a boss. I had several great mentors, and one of my first career chief, he would send me anywhere. He would see something. Matter of fact, he's the guy who sent me down there in 1980, and I won't go into where that place was in 1980. But but he sent me to a lot of stuff. Now there was a joke about, firefighter 1, firefighter 2, tune up, brakes, oil change. But, but I, but I got by going to a lot of classes, I got a very broad brush, right, on stuff. And stuff started happening at work or on calls, where if I had not taken that class, I wouldn't have a clue what to do. And matter of fact, everybody else was scratching their head. And I said, I think this will work. I saw this and blah, 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 whatever. Let's try it. And it worked.
Right.
So I think now on the other hand, you have to watch out, because there are folks that will go and get every certification. One of the things we see, part of our business here, as we travel around doing studies, we do have folks that have got their fire officer 2 in like 3.5 years. And it's like, all right, hold on. Maybe you need to ride that horse a little bit more before you try to get into the rodeo.
Right.
You know what I mean? And you need to, so I think I agree 100%. There's a lot of stuff we can go to. I think there's a part of that leadership on high is to make sure that person's developed, just like the young guy with the wreck, developed and ready to go on. Because if you turn them loose and there's no controlling factor, they're just going to go, go, go. Next thing you know, they really will have their second fire in their life. And they're expected now to perform at the company officer level. And they just may not have had that opportunity to get anything in the preparatory for that,
Right.
But I'm a big proponent. I sent guys if they wanted to go, if we could afford it, if it was expensive, we would say the first one's on me, but like firefighter 1 or EMT, which is over $1,000 now, right? We'll pay, you got to sign a document telling me you're going to pay me back. But in the end, if you don't make it and you want to go back again, you're going to cough up the money for the second one, because we've already been there once. And, you had said that you were going to be able to handle that,
Right.
and that's hard for a young training officer who's got pressure from down below to go to stuff. And they've only got $2,000 for a training budget. And, they've got multiple mouths to feed, multiple people. And it's like, and now with, 65% EMS and a lot less fire, am I better investing in the EMS side for those people versus the other side? And then who's more active? And it's not easy. It's not easy when you're small, trying to figure out where to invest that money. And that's where the Connecticut Fire Academy, the National Fire Academy, where again, they don't have, the Connecticut Fire Academy does not have a huge budget. A lot of what they roll the money over. When we register for a class and we take a class, it's actually paying for something else over here.
Right.
And they managed to make that work. And I'm excited about the idea of having more Fire Academy classes out in the field. I believe Jeff's on. I think I saw his call sign or whatever in the group. I think he was there. Is a program.
I'm here.
There he is.
Hey, Jeff, how are you?
Hi, Eriks. A virtual welcome to the great state of Connecticut.
Thank you.
You're welcome anytime.
And I got to tell you, Jeff has been great helping us to get the word out for these classes. He's been. I have 4 guys I got to thank later on. Then Jeff's one of them for getting this out.
And I would say, and it's not because Jeff is on the call now, but Jeff is solid. The Connecticut State Fire Training Program is really one of the gems of the New England Fire Service, and you're very blessed to have not only the facilities and the classes you do, but the staff there. And we have an amazing relationship with Jeff and his folks from the National Fire Academy, and it's really like hand in glove, and we're excited about that.
Yeah, and it's great to have a state director in the leadership role there as well.
Yeah.
Thanks, Jeff. I've walked in your shoes, right?
Exactly. He's climbed that mountain.
Hey, while I have the floor, and only because Eriks had brought it up, the Connecticut weekend scheduled for the weekend of September 11th. I just wanted to get the word out. I know there's a number of people on the line with us now, as well as those who will go back to the recorded version, but we still have plenty of space. I'm not sure if it's that weekend. Many people know we had to kick the can down the road. I think 3 cancellations we
Three
had
times
during
last year.
COVID, and we really pushed it as far out as we could because we did not know what the status and the impacts of COVID would be. So we pushed it as far into the federal fiscal year as we could. But we are struggling currently with registrations. Again, I'm not sure if it's that weekend, but if there's people on the line here that are interested, or if you would spread the word, please, to members of your departments that, if they've never been, this is a great opportunity to go. I think Connecticut has held state weekends. I think we missed 1 year, and for the most part, dating back to the early 1980s.
Yep.
And that's actually how I got back to Connecticut. I was a management intern at the National Fire Academy back in 1984. And that's when I met George Luther and Wayne Sanford, and they kind of brought me back to Connecticut. So
I'll tell you the crazy part. I think the first time I met Jeff, listen to this. He gave me the firefighter 3 exam from Illinois because Connecticut didn't have it. That's how long ago it was. I think that was you. It was either you or your predecessor, but I think you were the first certification guy. So I think
that's
that was
correct.
You. Yeah. So from Illinois.
And Nick, I'm assuming you passed, or you and Jeff had that awkward discussion afterwards.
The what? Oh, I passed. I did okay. I survived. But we did get a question, Eriks, directly related to what Jeff said. Someone's asking for you to look into your crystal ball and see if you can anticipate what requirements, restrictions, or whatever would be there during that weekend. I know that's kind of a hard lookout.
Yeah, if we stay the course, those vaccinated that show proof of vaccination, even if it's on their phone, will just basically go through the portal and you're on your way. If we stay the course, those that aren't vaccinated will be tested when they arrive on campus. So that's the process to get in. We may be in a place between now and September that we don't even test anymore because we get more people vaccinated. We're at herd immunity. So that's obviously a larger federal government discussion, but that's happening right now. So the pub reopened last week. I know that's always a great place to network when people are arriving, right? And that's been working out really well. Food service, we still have some differences there. So, we don't have silverware and a china right now. So we're doing all throwaway because that's just easier from a health and safety standpoint. We also don't have all of the food lines open as we have in the past. So we're not doing omelet bar right now. We're doing something else. I know it's an issue for some students. We also I've gotten some criticism that we don't have sprinkles next to the ice cream machine. It's just chocolate syrup. But again, we're just trying to mitigate some of the risk. But if I look in the future, that's like the way it is now will be then. As things get better, we may have like sprinkles next to the ice cream machine. We don't test anybody anymore, and we have omelet bar back, but that's not right now, but that's like the best case scenario. So right now, if you're worried, just tell people if you're vaccinated, you're good. If you're not, you might get tested if we stay under the current protocol, and hopefully all that kind of changes as it has over the last few weeks. And again, last week as an example, the week before, last week, 85+% people on campus vaccinated. The week before, 80+%. So each week it's getting better. And I think that's happening across the country. So no crystal ball, right? But that's kind of where we are.
Well, we got a big thank you
glad to help, Brett. So good question.
Let me digress for a minute and just remind everybody, because while we're happy that the pub is open, just remember that you're representing not only yourself, but you're representing the people that sent you there. And you need to just keep that in the back of your noodle. If you want to be an idiot, there's a lot of other places you can be idiots. And probably there's a lot of other times you can be an idiot. But I have seen over the years, people really be stupid and be sent home. and purely, without a doubt, uh, from spending time in town. Like it's not, it's not all the pub, but spending time in town and then finishing off the evening in the pub, and then doing something incredibly stupid. And then the next morning, finding themselves on the front curb with their luggage. Then they need to find their own way home. So again, just a little, we're a safety company, so I got to do safety things. Just remember though, that it's not just you. It's one thing for your department, for you to be banned forever to come back. It's another thing that your boss is sitting home and he has incredible pride and he's bragged to the mayor that he sent you down there because you're the best of the best. And then he gets a black eye because you got home 4 days early. And it won't take long for everybody to know. So
yeah, no, and it's a great reminder, Nick. And one of the things that I say a lot with the classes is, and some of you may have heard this, right? It's about two patches. The patch on your chest is who your family is and who you represent. The patch on your sleeve is a department that you're working for and whose colors you're flying, right? So you don't want to do anything to bring disrespect to either your family or to your fire department, right? Whether you're career or volunteer, it doesn't matter. So Emmitsburg is a really small town. For people that haven't been to Emmitsburg, it's in essence a village. It's got 2 traffic lights and everybody in town knows who lives there and they know who's a visitor, right? So we've got a great relationship with the town of Emmitsburg, with the people in Emmitsburg. They love having the National Fire Academy and the Emergency Management Institute there. But they also expect people to treat their community with respect, just as if that fire academy was in your community, right? So you want to do things that don't bring discredit to you or your organization or the National Fire Academy. And every so often, sadly, we do have some people that don't get that. And the pub, and this is one of the big things that people, think about is why you have a pub. Well, the pub is really, while you may have an adult beverage there, right? Beer and wine, that's what we provide. It's really there to continue those discussions that you have in the classroom in a more relaxed environment, right? So it's having a beverage with somebody in the class that you're talking about, how do you change protocols, for example, for decon after a structure fire, or, maybe it's a safety and health class where one department has a lot of people resisting wearing seatbelts, right? So that's just one example. It could be in community risk reduction where somebody's trying to figure out how to fund smoke detectors, right, in their community. So, and somebody else in class might say, look, I've got a relationship with the Rotary Club or with the Elks, and they write me a check every year and we buy smoke alarms and they get the credit for it. So really the pub, this continues those discussions that happen in the classroom and kind of build that network.
And I've had some conversations where the comfort level and the emotion of the class or the topic of the class had people open up and get some stuff off their chest that they had been in counseling for and couldn't get off their chest. But it was just the moon and the stars all aligned and it was crazy. But that's not the normal evolution. But more friends, more decisions, more solutions take place in the dining hall, out to Uncle Tom's cabin, and in the pub. Then there's going to be good stuff in the classroom, and we're going to tell you about stuff. But spending a half an hour drilling down and seeing how you can band-aid it together in your community, that's that social side, and that's why it's so important. As you said, is let's get it back up to 80%. Let's get more and more people, let's get more people back. Because again, that conversation, as Eriks knows, where there's a little change going on in some of the programs and where it's not death by PowerPoint anymore. We're really trying to get away from that. We're trying to get it to the students are actually almost teaching the class or almost teaching themselves. So we're getting away from hours and hours of PowerPoint with some questions to much more activities, much more working together, and then sharing that knowledge that you just created or you shared with the rest of the group. And that's the way to go. It is a student, it's your class. It's truly your class, and again, we can hammer you with PowerPoints. We got plenty of those, but in all actuality, we're seeing a shift, particularly in community risk reduction, to its activities, conversations, sharing information, sharing concepts, and then seeing how that works. And it's working. It's doing a good job. Sir, is there anything else? We're almost an hour and 20 here. I don't want to keep you too long.
No, this has been great. So I mean, I'll just say, you said it was going to be an hour, so we're at an hour 20. But that's okay, because it's great to share our work, and really it's great to share our partnership, right? Because it's not about me, it's about us. The privilege I have serving as a superintendent is I work for the American Fire Service, right? The men and women that work at the National Fire Academy are here to serve the American Fire Service, right? If I talk to volunteer audiences, they say the National Fire Academy is all for career and we don't do anything for volunteers. If I talk to career people, they say it's all about volunteers. And the answer is it's for all. It's for all of our fire service providers, whether they're career or volunteer. And again, it's great to see Jeff on the call, but the relationship we have with the state fire training programs across the country is something that I value, both in my previous role and in my current role, because that really is the force multiplier. Those folks at the Connecticut Fire Academy are representatives of us, ambassadors for the program, and they do a lot to share our work, and we do a lot to share our work. So it's really kind of building on that so that we can let every firefighter in the country know, there's a National Fire Academy. If you want to come, we got a place for you. So it's not just for the chief officers, it's for everybody, right? So it could be a volunteer that's working on a community risk reduction program in the middle of Idaho. It could be a career person from New York City that's going to be managing the hazmat team. And we have something on the schedule that everybody will find of interest. You just have to make the time. You have to fill out an application, get your chief to support it, and get to us. And we'd love to have you.
I'm glad you said it's not just for chiefs. We know that, and I don't want you to launch on the EFO now, because I think that would send us way over. But the EFO, the Executive Fire Officer, is in rework. The Managing Fire Officer is a great program for company officers. It is the company officer version of EFO. You do have to have a degree to get to the whole process. There are projects that are due, but it is really a really good program for that mid-level person. Well, listen, Eriks, thank you so much. I truly appreciate you coming on. It was everything we hoped for. I do need to do a couple things. I hope you bear with me.
Yeah, no, I'm good. I'm glad I met your expectations, because you're close enough you could drive down here. So, right, I was a little worried about that.
Now,
Nick, are you taking questions or?
yes. I didn't. Who is it?
First, this is Dave from Jersey there. Sorry, I'm a little shy here, but once again, want to thank you again for the series there. It's his first for sponsoring. This is great. So thank you to Nick for there, and we're going to get the attendance up. Question to Eric here. I started in EMS in New Jersey, and I fought fire in Klamath Falls and Pendleton and everything. And I noticed, even in Oregon, that there's quite a range in, polarization in political beliefs and all. So my question is that, you're talking about testing for COVID and everything. We look back, we remember 30 years ago, when it was AIDS came out, and we started with, gloves. Nobody wore gloves, and now it's universal precautions with gloves, and now it's gloves, masks, face shield, and everything like that. And SCBA, that's universal. You don't go into a, burning building without SCBA and fit testing and all too. Why can't
You cut out, Dave.
Oh, you cut out. We still have you?
He's not, his mic's still on.
100% vaccination there?
Oh, okay.
Okay. So it's
She
a
coughed
great
out the
question,
best part.
No, it's a great question. And I think Nick may have been in the classroom, because this comes up quite a bit. Our legal counsel has told us, as long as we're still under emergency use authorization for the vaccination, we cannot mandate it, right? So we're still under that guideline on the federal system, because I get that a lot. Why don't you just require everybody to be vaccinated? And what I've heard is, look, colleges, universities in the fall are requiring people to be vaccinated. Why aren't you? Well, we're just not there yet, right? Because we're still under emergency use authorization, we can't do it. But what I can do is highly encourage people to be vaccinated on campus, which is what we're doing. So, if that changes down the road, we'll obviously send that information. But right now, our legal counsel is telling us we cannot mandate it.
We should mention that and tell me if I'm wrong, Eriks, we should mention that if you're not vaccinated, you're wearing a mask in class.
Correct. And the other thing to build on that, Nick, is not only are you wearing a mask, but we've also told people that are vaccinated, if they want to wear a mask because that makes them feel safer or more comfortable, there's no public shaming. That's totally up to them. So whether you wear a mask doesn't mean you're vaccinated or not. It just means you choose to wear a mask. If you haven't been vaccinated, you will wear a mask.
Thank you.
All right,
Yeah.
well, thumbs up to that. Yeah, I've taken a lot of classes at College of Siskiyous with even instructor chewing tobacco there. Not much more chewing tobacco in the class anymore, huh? So
We ran into an issue not too long ago where, we had a student that says, I'm not vaccinated. I don't plan to be vaccinated. You're not going to test me. And my response was, look, it's not my decision. It's a federal government protocol. And if you choose not to be vaccinated, that's your decision. If you want to come on campus, you choose not to be tested, then you're going to go home, right? This is non-negotiable. It's the standard, and it is what it is for everybody. And that would be the same for a staff member, for an instructor, for a student. So those protocols are in place for the health and safety of everybody on campus.
yeah, and the vaccines will receive, the full authorization. I mean, there was a time in our careers, remember, when firefighters thought it was unmanly to wear SCBA. You're supposed to go in there and eat the smoke, smoke eaters, and all that. And now, now there are lawsuits and everything and stuff there. I'm sure you're aware of there, that you must shave a clear line there too. Even if there's a medical condition or something there, you must have that airtight seal. So this has only happened in the past few years, these changes and everything. And
and Dave, it's a great question, right? And it's really kind of one of these ongoing themes for the fire service across the country and really across the world. It's changing culture. And I will use my example in Oregon. We were fortunate to receive an AFG grant, and we purchased a mobile fire training unit, a tractor trailer that we could take across the state for hands-on training. And I had some departments that had volunteers that refused to shave. And they said, look, they just drive the tender. They don't need to wear an SCBA, but they want to participate in the live fire training. And I said, look, our rules are simple. You're going to follow Oregon OSHA standards for respiratory protection. And if not, you're not going to go in the building. Now, two of these people look like they could be on ZZ Top. And they said they refused to shave. And my response was, look, it's not negotiable. You either meet the standard or you don't. If you don't meet the standard, we're not going to train you. And that word got across the state. And we actually got accolades from the fire service and from the Chiefs Association and the safety and health folks saying, good for you, because that's how we change culture.
It doesn't.
And they don't even have to shave completely there. I'm working on an EMS crew now with people that are observant, both Orthodox Jews and Muslims and everything, and because of religious reasons, but they can all they need to do is just shave around the seal of the, of that and all too. So there's a way to accomplish anything. So
yes.
Thank you, David. Any other questions? Hearing none. Let me just, we'll start spinning down here. So again, Eriks, thank you so much. I do just have a couple of shameless plugs here. First, I do want to thank, again, Jeff Morissette, Tony Manfredi. Of course, now I can't think of Pete. I lost it. And then John Oates, Pete from the Instructors Association, Bonomi, thank you. For doing a good job of sending the email out to their membership.